everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today at the Better Learning Leadership Conference. My name is Dr Claire Dembry and I'm the Head of Language Research in the ELT group here in Cambridge. My team works to integrate the latest in research thinking into the support that we provide for learners, for teachers and for educational leaders just like you. So that's understanding academic research and using that to produce learning materials. My talk today is about the principles of language learning. Today I'm going to share with you some work that we've been doing on drawing together current research on second language acquisition in order to understand what makes learning really effective. I'll discuss how we can use this approach to make decisions about teaching and learning with a bit of a focus on digital contexts, given that's something that's become increasingly important to us all over the past year. And I'll provide you with a few ideas about how perhaps you could do the same in your institution. So let's make a start. So I'm going to have a look at two things. First of all, I'll start by describing the framework that we've put together that draws on second language acquisition research, the principles of language learning. This framework specifically helps us with a pedagogy first approach when developing and using ELT materials. Then I'll look at how the principles of language learning can help us to consider things like the value of digital technology in specific teaching contexts and in learning materials. I'll pick out some parts of the framework, I'll summarise the research, and then we'll have a little look at what this means in the classroom. So let's make a start. So the principles of language learning really tries to address a fundamental question. How can we improve how we learn language? There's no simple answer to this. Learning a language is so complicated and affected by so many different factors. But from the extensive research into second language acquisition that's happened over the years, along with our experience of language learning in classrooms all around the world, we've developed a series of principles that we can use to improve how we learn, and we call these the principles of language learning. These principles underpin the approach that Cambridge takes to developing learning materials in course books, online and digital, and I think that they can help you too to reflect on what really matters in improving language programmes in your own context. Our first step is understanding the factors that affect learning. So these key areas of learning, and we think that these are cognition, engagement and behaviours. So cognition is the mental processes involved in gaining knowledge and understanding things. Engagement is the quality and the quantity of learners' participation, because we're all looking for really motivated and active learners. And the behaviours are kind of the learned actions and skills that enable students to access learning. And we're not saying that the principles are completely comprehensive, nor that they're completely separate from each other. Learning's really nuanced and kind of messy and interwoven. Instead, what we're saying is that these are key useful things to consider when developing learning materials and when in the classroom, and that this is a useful way to organise them. So this is our diagram, and as you can see, we've broken things down a little bit further. Let's have a closer look. So we have the three key areas: cognition, engagement and behaviours. And within that, we've broken things down further into learning impact factors. These are the factors that research tells us that are vital in the language learning process and in learning in general. Let's just have a look at one as an example. So I'll unpack this a little bit more and I can show you the detail that we have. So within engagement, let's have a little look at relevance. So here for relevance, we have insights from research, which suggests that if we're emotionally invested in something and we can connect it to our own lives, then we're more motivated. And from that, and for each of these impact factors, We've then suggested principles for learning activities. In this case, and learners should see the value in their learning, and that you could achieve this by adapting to specific learner groups. Along with this, we're also really aware that learning itself is a multi-phase process involving intake or presentation of new concepts, practice and feedback, and that learning impact factors, like relevance here, work differently at each phase. In this case, we can bring relevance to life in the intake stage by doing things like being really explicit about why the aims of the lesson are relevant to learners. In the practice phase, we can do things like give learners opportunity to personalise for their own interests and their own contexts. And within feedback, we can actively try and elicit how useful learners found the activities to be. As well as this stage-by-stage breakdown, the principles of learning also looks at what this means for digital, shown here in the pink box. We're going to have a little look at that a little bit further. So there's lots of detail in the principles of learning. And what I'm going to do now is just run through one example from each of the three big categories and show you kind of some examples of digital tools and how we've used this information to inform products that we've made. So let's start with cognitive load. So insights from research tell us that the amount of information we can retain at any one time isn't unlimited. Learning happens in our working memory. It hasn't got unlimited capacity. We can't hold lots of information in one go. And when we're overwhelmed, our learning is inhibited and we can't take in any new information. We experience this cognitive overload. I'm sure it's all really familiar to you. In order to avoid this, we need to create materials that stagger information. This could be in the input or feedback phase, but chunking things into kind of stages is really important. Having things be really kind of digestible. So in practice, we can use digital materials to do this really well by taking a kind of bite-sized learning approach where activities are broken down over different screens rather than learners being kind of confronted with everything on the page as you would find in a traditional textbook. And they can see how far they're through activities, they can get kind of feedback independent of their teacher. And so there's lots of benefits in terms of cognitive load as compared to kind of textbook learning. And if we now look at engagement and we look at stimulation, research tells us that we're more motivated to engage in learning tasks which stimulate our senses, so particularly activities that involve movement or physical activity, visuals, humour, music, games, this kind of thing. And try and hold your attention while I've set the fish off. But this is where kind of gamification really comes into its own. It can provide real benefit. In this example here, the fish has to eat the words that are spelled correctly in order to grow, and students kind of get or lose points depending on kind of if they choose the right words. Games like this can be really immersive, and provided that they're well designed, they can offer really useful learning opportunities to students. Leave the fish for a minute. And having a look at one last area, so if we think about behaviours and we look at goal setting. So goal setting helps students to really think about what they want to achieve. And that could be on a small scale, or as in what do you want to achieve in the lesson or this week or whatever. It could be on a much larger scale. And it helps kind of students work out how to achieve this. It can also help reduce the challenge of learning a language into kind of more manageable steps, so that we can feel a real sense of progress as we make kind of small and frequent steps towards our goal, ticking things off along the way. And learning materials should try to foster this by supporting learners to work towards manageable goals. And we do this digitally by showing the sense of progress and movement towards these goals through lessons or through units. And lots of digital tools have kind of challenges and rewards where learners can kind of complete tasks and collect things and kind of get medals and badges and stars, although actually there is a lot of complexity in the research around rewards and motivation, as I'm sure anyone who has small children who's tried to implement any kind of sticker chart situation will know. But yeah, so using digital to kind of see progress is something that really supports the things set out by the principles of learning. And so learners can feel that they're making progress, and this might not be something that's always kind of really typical in the language classroom normally. Okay, so just to finish then, that was quite a lot of info. I do have some resources to share, so you can have a look through the principles of learning for yourself. But having a clear approach to teaching in digital contexts in particular is really important, especially given the changes that we've all faced over the past year. And a framework like the principles of language learning, which is summarised from second language acquisition research and is applied to ELT materials in particular, can be really useful in materials development. Research frameworks like this also help us to be critical and to evaluate the benefits of different approaches and work out how we can best support our students. Thank you so much for listening. These are my references, and please enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.